So I am currently not able to start my presentation. So my colleague Juanjo from our marketing department is remote helping me. So if there's a little bit delay between what I say and what you see, please just bear with us. We're making do with what we can, and I hope that will be okay. Great. Thank you, Juanjo, for getting me started. What I'm talking about today is a really hot topic which really affects everybody in China, but also in the headquarters in a foreign country. And those are the top mistakes foreign companies and especially foreign headquarters make, which really hurt us in China. So which really hurt us, the daughter companies of those international firms in China. And of course, no headquarter says, well, let me do something horrible for China. No, they all have always the best intention. It is usually a combination of a lack of information and lack of China understanding and just incorrect assumption that are driving them. And today we're diving into the top 10 mistakes foreign headquarters make in China. Juanjo, please get us to the next slide. Okay, quick introduction about myself. I think most of you know me. My name is Miriam. I am working for Direct HR. Direct HR is one of the largest German-speaking recruiting companies in China. We have been here for more than 15 years, 16 years actually now. We are focusing on international companies in China and now also since 2 years in Thailand. We are your recruiting partner if you're looking for employees who earn more than 500,000 renminbi. That means we are a mid to upper level recruiting company, head of department and above to a China GM, China MD, maybe somebody Asia Pacific responsibility. This is what we do. We focus in general on what I call the nerdy and dirty clients. So everybody from heavy machinery to industrial manufacturing, automation, robotics, even pharmaceutical and so on. So basically everything where a B2B environment is given. Great. Without much further ado, let's get started with the first mistake that companies are making in China, and that is a one-size-fits-all strategy. And we understand, right? The global decision makers are in the headquarters and they have a lot on their plate. So they're dealing maybe with different countries. They have to deal with different legal situations or legal structures. And they also have a very high demand for compliance, right? So there's a big push from the headquarters for a global consistency in everything from titles, salary, pricing, branding, business strategies, and so on. But to be honest, this is quite a challenge, I think, as many of us in China know. A very simple example is salary increases. Whereas, for example, in Germany, anybody would be happy to have 3% salary increase. In the past several years, 3% increase would also almost be a demotion. So a 10% increase was not unusual, even though last year I would say the increase was lower. So this is just one of many examples. Another example would be global key accounts. So a lot of my headquarters, they tell me, oh, you know, we have these global key accounts. We're working with company X here, here, and here. So we'll also work with them in China. But then we have to say, well, but this is not how it's really happening, is it? Because in China, the local purchasing department, they have a lot of freedom with whom they work for and what kind of prices they ask for. And then I often feel the headquarter is quite surprised about that. This also often is reflected by lost competitiveness, and that the headquarter is trying to just project how it is at home onto the China market, and they don't fully understand how hyper competitive China is as a market and how fast everything is moving. So what's working in Europe is not necessarily working in the States. And so how can you do that? And this is one thing I would really encourage you, if you're a China manager, to inform your headquarter and to just keep pushing and keep pushing, is to make sure that they have knowledge. Headquarter needs to inform themselves. The Chinese GM needs to probably make a much greater effort in explaining and and sometimes even explaining again and again what is really going on in China. The next part, the next mistake is mistake number 2. Mistake number 2, Juanjo, if you could change the slides, is a mistake that's actually really, that I take quite personal, and that is making decisions based on outdated information. Let's look at it. How do we make decisions? Everybody makes decisions ideally by collecting as many data points as we can. We look at reports, we do our own research, we have in-house, external research, we gather all the information we can, we connect the dots, and then we make a decision, right? So far, so good. But the problem is a lot of times the headquarter does not have updated information, or they are just, let's call it tainted. And tainted is a nice word in this case. So in many Western countries, the media is portraying quite a negative light on what's going on in China. So they pick and choose certain topics which they know create an emotional reaction in the reader, so that the reader is going to buy the newspaper. Because what do the media agencies want? The newspapers and the news channels, they want clicks and they want purchases. So they care less about a really balanced picture and overview, and they care more about highlighting those stories that makes people say, wow, I really need to know more. And then a lot of that is going via negative publicity. So in a business context, this may mean it focuses on economic slowdowns. It may focus on political issues, on regulatory crackdowns, or also on a kind of subjective feeling of dangerous. Everything is dangerous. I often hear in the West, oh, Chinese firms are coming to us, we are in danger. So this feeling of danger. We also have a big problem that a lot of individuals have been living and working in China, and then somewhere during the pandemic, maybe they left and have not come back necessarily. So a lot of them had China experience and background, so they are very credible, but now they haven't been in China for 3, 4, maybe 5 years, worst case longer. And so they are now often self-employed as consultants and whatever. And then they have credibility because they had been in China, but they haven't been in China recently, so the information is outdated. And this is very dangerous. As a recruiter myself, I often have the situation when I'm pitching to a client and they say, thank you, Ms. Wickertsheim, we're also talking to this person for the same search. And then I know the person and I'm like, well, wait a minute. This person is not a recruiter. This person has never done recruiting. Why is this person offering recruiting services? And it just is consulting and self-employment waves that we have at the moment, as the economy is not so great. One thing I will say about newspapers, I personally am interviewed every now and then by smaller newspapers or also by larger newspapers, and the quality of the interviews varies widely. What happens all too often is like this. I get an email asking if I'm willing to be interviewed. Yes, then I get 2, 3 questions. I write my answer and then they use it. That means there's no fact checking. They don't know if I know. And then the person who's writing it together is often also not the reporter, him or herself. So also just the way how interviews sometimes are collected are not the ideal way. And all of this means that information that is available to the decision makers is often not quite accurate. Please go to the next slide. Moving too slowly, and I think China speed is something that we all know. Global headquarter decision-making processes tend to take a very, very long time. We all know that Chinese competition is very fast. Local competitors act swiftly, they adapt, they'd rather go 2 steps forward, 3 steps forward, 1 step back, instead of, for example, a lot of Western Europeans who really like to think it through and take another few weeks or months to then get it through. And when it comes to terms like innovation or product development cycle, this is actually quite dangerous for market share and success. So one example I can give you, in April 2023, Airbus announced, so Airbus has a plant in Tianjin, maybe you know. Airbus announced to open a new assembly line in the plant in Tianjin, right? And then a year later, however, they said, oh no, instead of opening in 2024, we're going to delay it for 2 years until the end of 2026 or early 2026. And in the meantime, COMAC, which is the Chinese aircraft manufacturer, has brought its flagship, it's the C919, which is a direct local competitor to both Airbus and Boeing, and they brought it into a commercial service in May 2023. So just a few months after Airbus originally announced it. So if you consider that China accounts for around 20% or so of the commercial global aircraft market, this advantage to be fast and to move forward really wins the market share, and then other big players are missing out. This is not taking into account what happened, I think, yesterday, where China decided to not purchase any additional parts or planes from Boeing due to the situation with America. But what I'm trying to say is moving too slowly and underestimating China's speed is really making companies lose market share. Please move to the next slide, Juanjo. Headquarter visits, and maybe you can feel I'm also extremely passionate about this. So usually when a CEO from the headquarter comes to China, he or she also calls me up. We either have a project to discuss or we just share information. We have a lunch or I go to their factory or whatever. How often do they come on average? The number is 2. So the average CEO comes 2 times per year. And that is already a good average. Many of them come less. And so that is not enough. Each time a CEO comes, I always say they get a very beautified trip. That means they clean the factory, you know, everybody dresses up nicely, everybody cleans their table, there's no clutter, and the visits are somewhat curated. That means it is prepared before, because of course the China GM and the China organization wants to make a good impression. The big CEO is coming, but this is often not showing the true situation of China. And again, it's data points, important data points that then the CEO is lacking to make the correct decision. And also this is a big issue. The level below the CEO, where you have the global head of department, global purchasing, global HR, global finance, global production, these people responsible for many different countries, most of them don't come. I would say, just a guesstimate, that about 80% of global HR leaders have not been in China. I can't hear you, so you may agree or disagree. But this is a big problem. I personally, if you're working in the headquarter, I would encourage you to make sure that your global head of departments are traveling, ideally 4 times a year, to your different locations. Because again, how is the global head of HR going to make a correct decision for the HR strategy in China if he or she has never been? Never. And so that is actually quite a big problem, and a bottleneck that the headquarter is creating needlessly. And I understand it. International travel is difficult. We all, you know, prefer to speak our own language, and maybe time differences and airplane travel is not what they want. But I really truly believe if you're in a global role, you need to travel to your global outlets. At least if China makes more than a certain percentage, let's say more than 20–25% of your global business. Juanjo, please go to the next one. Mistake number 5, and this is also very important and a very common mistake that headquarters make because they are coming from a different mindset, is underestimating the local competition. And why do they underestimate? On the one hand, often they have an outdated view on China. If your view of China is what it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, it is very outdated. And the same is true for how a lot of Western headquarters view Chinese firms, what Chinese firms are able to do, the quality that Chinese firms are able to produce. And so if we are very realistic, if I look today, right now, if I look at the Chinese firms, and trade war aside, the main problems or the main challenges that international firms have is, number one, the local Chinese competition got so good and still quite affordable in many industries. And number two, the price pressure. Many clients, their profit margin since the pandemic until now, their profit margin has been reducing. Many of the clients are happy if they're still making a margin. So it's just the competition is so fierce that this is something that is often not understood in headquarters, and it is difficult to understand because they came from 20 years, it was different, and then overnight like this, it changed. So this is again in the responsibility of the China manager to talk and to educate, to talk and to educate, and to talk and to educate again and again, and to have the headquarter people come to us and to see what's really going on. Maybe on social media, on your LinkedIn or wherever else, you may see every now and then you have somebody come and they say, wow, China is so modern. And then all of us say, well, yes, we know. But then they don't know. So it's really new information for them. So this exchange from headquarters to come to see what's going on in China is super important. Any way you can enforce it, it is highly recommended to do so. Juanjo, please change to the next one. Lack of local advisors and foreign contacts. This is equally very important, and it plays a little bit into what I said at an earlier point. A lot of the advisors that Western companies have outdated information. And you know what's very common? A company in Germany wants a German-speaking advisor. A company in France wants a French-speaking advisor. It's very common. We automatically trust somebody who speaks our own language, comes from our own background, right? So that is the first filter. And then if you find somebody who may be German and used to live in China, automatically companies value this person very high. Because again, this understanding of speed and time is not understood so well in the headquarters because it works differently in many European or Western countries. And so in the end of the day, they don't have the information they need, and they don't try to speak to enough contact persons and local advisors in China. And this is something, if you are talking to your headquarters, I would recommend, maybe you can even set some meetings, have them talk to a lawyer, finance advisor, management consulting company, a recruiting firm, welcome to call me, but anybody else really. So more data points make better conversations, and to just really guide your CEO or guide your head of department, so whoever is coming to visit you, to guide them through this process, to talk to people that they can trust, and to really are in China to be able to explain what's going on. Get them to industry events. In my opinion, it's more important to have a CEO or somebody go to chamber meetings or industry events or exhibitions to see what's really going on, instead of having them go to a KTV dinner just because we all go to KTV dinners. And I know team building is important, but then if there's limited time, there's really a judgment to be made here. Please move on, Juanjo. Mistake number 7, and this is a big one, ignoring China's official targets. And I think there are several aspects to it. First of all, and I can only speak for myself, when I look at German politics, I look at it, of course, from a distance. I'm also like, yeah, let's see what will happen. So very often in many other countries, it's not that we don't take politicians serious, of course we do, but things take a very long time. A lot of things are discussed forever. Then you have a democratic discussion system. Party A wants this, party B wants this, and you kind of come up somewhere in the middle. And this is different in China. So Chinese targets are being set, and most of the time they're pursued very strongly. And so very quick pop quiz. Do you know, or does your headquarter know, what is China 2025, made in China? Do you or does your headquarter know what is China 2035? Do you know the difference, transformation versus standardization, building versus regulation? Do you know what the next 10 years, do you know that the next 10 years have the target to set global standards? Do we know that from 2030 to 2035, the target is to surpass the leading global industries in technological innovation? Do we know that in 2049, the target is to reach tech leadership, and China envisions to becoming the world dominant technological player? Do we know this? If we don't know this, and these are this is public information. You can Google it, you can search it. It's in Chinese, it's in English, it's probably in French or German or Spanish or wherever you're from. This is not secret, but this is basic information the headquarter is already lacking. And so what's important to understand is that once these targets are set, a lot of rules and regulations, they're going in the right way, in the same way. And if your company, whatever industry you're in, if you're opposing to that, you will have a problem. But if you're able to navigate yourself in a way that's kind of floating on the wave, then you can have a lot of benefits. You can have tax incentives, other benefits, and so on. So this is basic information that, again, a headquarter often doesn't know. And I would really encourage you to just prepare this information and tell them, and probably you have to repeat it 5 times, but this is very important. Next one, please, Juanjo. Mistake number 8, ignoring Chinese firms' global expansion. And if you are in China, this is not new to you. If you're outside of China, then you really do not know what's coming. We have just started with the 𝗀cie. So 𝗀cie means going global, right? Expansion. We've seen it, it's not so new, but we're now at the first bigger wave. And the Chinese firms are not just competing with your international companies in China. It's not only about China. It is now about global. So very soon, your competitor, your client, your supplier globally is going to be Chinese. In your home market, if you're in France or in Germany or in Australia or wherever you are, you will have Chinese competitors who are coming in with a good amount of investment and already a very tested and tried product and an entire supply chain behind them. And this is just going to come surprisingly really, really quick. And I don't think this has not happened before in the history of the world that I'm aware of. So I don't think companies and decision makers are able to fully grasp the speed with which this will be happening. So we are just seeing the first signs today, especially in automotive. I think aerospace will also come soon, electronics and so on. But 5 years from now and 10 years from now, this will be a decision at every board meeting in every company in probably most countries. And I feel this is also something where we just need to raise awareness to ensure that our international company can stay competitive on an international scale. Mistake number 9, please, Juanjo. Thank you. Underestimating China's supply chain. So China has spent, 2 decades, little bit more, to build a huge supply chain network. It's massive, and it is a huge competitive advantage. We are seeing that now in the trade war. If you're following on social media, I personally find usually Chinese individuals' humor quite nice on social media, where they say basically everything that a normal consumer in another country may use in his or her day-to-day is made in China and then just sold with an up price. Anyways, one thing that's important to understand is that Chinese have a supplier preference. So Chinese prefer to work with other Chinese. The same as when 15, 20 years ago, Germans came to China. You first had the Siemenses and the Volkswagens and the big MNCs of this world. They came to China for the market. And then these companies made their own suppliers also come. So I would also often ask 15 years ago, because yes, I've been in this job a long time, I would say, okay, you're a German company, welcome to China. Why are you coming to China? Oh yeah, we have to. Okay. So this is a dynamic which is very common, and we are seeing this. So we are seeing the waves of Chinese companies expanding abroad, and when they do, they bring their entire supply chain with them. A good example, my favorite example is, for example, BYD in December 23 announced plans to build their first European plant, which is supposed to be in Hungary, for more than, I think, 100,000 or so passenger vehicles per year. And this is a great way to just show you how the big companies go first, and then they bring their supply chain. and they bring their local production and integrate into the supply chain in Europe. So if you're thinking that, oh, the Chinese companies are coming, I'm a supplier, surely they will work with you. This is not necessarily going to be true. I would even argue this is likely not going to be true. How this will play out on a policy level remains to be seen, but that is just something that I think is an incorrect assumption that many companies that at least I talk to make. That brings us to mistake number 10. And this is also one that is very common, misunderstanding Chinese market potential. And I'm not sure if you ever had this discussion with your headquarter when they said, our product is this is our product. And China is so big. If only every 1,000, every 10,000 Chinese buys my product, we will be so rich. And then you would say, well, that's not a business strategy, but you would be surprised. I have had this exact conversation hundreds of times. This is, of course, very surface level, but this is how many people are still thinking. And so there's a disconnect between size of population and market size. Just because China is big, it doesn't mean the market is big. It also often, especially companies coming new, which had been muted during the pandemic years. And last year, actually, we had some companies coming new. In the first quarter of this year, the first quarter this year was actually a pretty okay quarter for some companies. And we had some new companies coming in. Now, of course, nobody knows what's going to happen. But they don't necessarily assess the demand. They don't also necessarily understand how is the competition already and how quickly can my product be replaced. If this is my product, this can be replaced immediately. If I have a simple product, if I'm trying to compete on price, this is not going to work out. In China, if your strategy is to be cheaper in order to win market share, this is not working out for international companies. It's just not. So I feel a lot of them are setting up quite unrealistic expectations and growth targets. And again, if you are managing China and if you're the bridge between what's going on in China and your headquarters, to really just make sure you have this kind of information and to just give them the hard news. And of course, it's hard news. And at the same time, I think they are underestimating the potential of Chinese firms. So Chinese firms have evolved into strong competitors in nearly all sectors. And so even if it's not a Chinese firm that's going to replace your product, somebody else will. And I saw this very interesting tidbit today in light of the trade war. So it said, China is not buying American oil anymore, but it may be buying Canadian oil. China may not be buying American beef anymore, but it may be buying Australian beef. China may not be buying Boeing anymore, but it can be buying French Airbus. And China may not be buying soybeans from America anymore, but it shifted its soybeans need to Brazil. So what I'm trying to say is whatever your product is, it probably already exists, or it can also be procured from another source and quite quickly. And I think that is something that headquarters often don't understand very well. So in conclusion, Juanjo, if you could move to the last slide. Thank you very much. A few key takeaways. So if you are either from the headquarter, it would be great if you're joining today, or if you are talking to your headquarter, or if you can influence your headquarter, I would really recommend to follow basically these 4 guidelines. Be faster, be more flexible, understanding China's speed, visit more often and sending the right people. And yes, this also includes the head of department, even though if there's a little bit of resistance, encouraging them to come in whatever way works, right? So of course we want to have a positive and mutually beneficial visit. We don't want to force anybody, but these visits need to happen. At the same time, if you're the China GM, please also send your heads of departments. Please also send your heads of departments to the headquarters. This people-to-people interaction is very important to happen. Invest in local talent and leverage local expertise, understanding career growth opportunities, decision-making responsibilities, what is a competitive salary for a local leader, what is not competitive, complement internal teams with local or international advisors, up-to-date advisors who really understand what's going on in China and how to operate in the Chinese market, and go beyond the headlines to really increase an awareness in the headquarters that even though if they're reading 10 different newspapers, their sources may be still lacking the completeness that one would ask for, to really have all the data points and really encourage them to speak to a variety of individuals in China who have recently been in China to get the full picture. Everybody, thank you so much. Maybe you can sense I'm really passionate about this, because these 10 mistakes are the ones which are happening over and over again, and it causes pain for us in China, for the China entities, and it is not necessary. So a lot of it is mindset. Mindset is cheaper to fix than a product failure, but at the same time, it is also harder to fix, because mindset also protects some people who say, I've always done it this way. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to be out of my comfort zone, and I surely don't want to be wrong. So mindset is a very tricky thing, but all of these are fixable. And especially now when times are getting quite stormy, it really is important that the management of the China entity and the headquarters have a close and honest exchange. And sometimes that also means pushing, I don't want to say their nose, but pushing the right information onto their table to make sure they really have all the information. Guys, thank you so much. If you have any questions, we can talk about that later. And without much further ado, thank you, Juanjo, for helping me out. I would like to hand over to Catherine.
Thank you, Miriam. And that was really great that you laid down all of those points that I can just neatly hook into and continue with mine. So I hope that this will be, let me just clear everything out of my internal screens. Could you just confirm to me that you actually are seeing my title slide properly, seeing as we're having one of those days? Okay, perfect. At least mine is working nicely. Thank you. Thank you, Microsoft. Yeah, thank you, Miriam. And it is really a pleasure to be here today, because actually my connection to Miriam kind of indirectly started out when I also was looking for a GM for my China business back in my corporate days. And at that time, I didn't actually talk to Miriam, but I did talk to quite a few of her team. And it was a couple of years after that we met. As Miriam mentioned from the beginning, my name is Catherine Reed. I'm actually a consultant for small and medium-sized companies, mostly in the consumer goods space, especially in food and beverage, who are looking to move between Europe and Asia. At the moment, it's also increasingly, as Miriam also mentioned, between Asia and Europe. I'm getting more and more projects to work into Europe, especially into Eastern Europe at the minute. And originally, I'm from the UK. I've been living in Austria now for at least half of my life. And I've always been in export. So I started out in automotive, and then I had a short intermezzo in rubber stamps, and then 18 years at the brand 𝗵, which I'm sure many of you know. And then about half a year before the pandemic, I started out on my own as a consultant, which was super timing, but I'm still here, and I'm still not quite commuting 10 times a year to China as I did in my corporate days, but I'm still visiting fairly regularly, or as regularly as I possibly can, because it is such a huge job to keep up to date on all of the changes and everything that's going on. So what I would really like to address today, if we're talking about how to future-proof your China sales, is this question about evaluating your distributor partnerships. It's just one aspect of future-proofing your Chinese business, obviously, but having the right partners and having really strong relationships means that when challenges or crises really do occur, then you can face those together and it helps you to find better solutions. So I would say that my experience in the past has also shown that at times when, when certificates didn't come through on time, or when the Chinese authorities blocked imports of your products because they said you had to comply with some regulation that didn't seem to make sense to your German production, then it really helps if you have a strong partner on the Chinese side. So I would like to dive into that, and also to give you a practical framework for you to think about as to whether maybe some of your Chinese distributors, because probably you have several across the regions, might be either in need of a little bit of TLC from your side to improve that relationship, or whether maybe you need to work with them to improve things, or even think about swapping them out for an alternative if you can find a suitable alternative. Okay, there we go. So we all know that China speed exists. And we also know that geopolitics right now is stuck in this kind of reality show drama. So our distribution partners in China are, on the one hand, they're in this situation that they need to evolve to survive in this really cutthroat domestic market situation that they have. But they also have to juggle the overseas situation that all of us know about. So either they're facing it from the importer side, or for part of their business, they're facing it from the exporting side, but they are still faced with and still impacted by all of the geopolitics of things. And I think that, realistically speaking, most of us have kind of got the message by now that consumer preferences, that regulations, digital ecosystems, and also the competitive landscape, that they are literally changing by the day. What I do find, though, when I'm talking with mostly European clients, is that they're not actually doing any kind of regular systematic audit of their China distributors. And a company that had strong partners 5 years ago might now be in a situation that those partners are not the right ones for today's Chinese market, for their brand. And, all of us talk when we first negotiating with distribution partners, almost all of us talk about we're in this for the long term. But realistically speaking, it is also like a marriage. And if both of you evolve in different directions and those are not compatible with each other, there sometimes does come that point where you have to either change things, or you have to decide that this is not the right partner for you going forward. So how are you as a company systematically assessing whether your distribution partner is really keeping up? And do you have like a mental checklist, at least, of early warning signs that suggest you need to upgrade your partners? Lots of brands, especially in the Chinese market, neglect to reassess the distribution partners regularly because they get too tied up in the speed and the details of everything that's changing and everything that they need to learn about the market. And then, even if they do assess those people, they're looking at it purely from a sales numbers approach. They're not necessarily assessing the whole market situation or taking a structured approach. So the first question that I would encourage to ask yourselves is it you? Miriam talked about this in her presentation. Are you visiting the client enough? Are you being flexible enough? Are you actually listening to what the client is telling you or what your distribution partners are telling you? Are your expectations realistic or your KPIs impossible? Often a partner who comes and who's demanding is treated as being a nuisance rather than being somebody who's bringing in valuable insights and valuable market data. So I think that it's important for you to think about that. Also, if you are, for example, the person who's responsible for the Chinese market, and you are faced with bringing your CEO or bringing your global heads of, in theory, 4 times a year into China, make sure that you're briefing those people properly in advance. It's one thing for you to bring in your global head of HR or your global head of marketing into the Chinese market, but if they are not culturally aware and if they are not open to learning all of the things that they're going to hear from your Chinese partners, whatever that stakeholder may be, whether it be your Chinese office or whether it be your distributors, then that could do more damage than it actually helps you. Because you don't want to be in a situation that somebody comes in, promises something which is unrealistic, and then goes home and starts talking to the office as if they are now the new expert on China, whilst actually they haven't understood the fact that they need to spend time really listening and really developing relationships with the stakeholders in your China business, if that is a key part of your global strategy. Okay. So, like I mentioned, I'd like to invite you today to take a step back in your thoughts beyond the standard sales KPIs and to really think that if a partner comes to you with a lot of questions, or if a partner makes a lot of pressure on you from the Chinese market, that is not necessarily a sign of somebody who's a nuisance, but they might just be making a cry for help for you to really adapt to the Chinese market. And I'd like to go through a basic framework where you can think about how you'd score your Chinese distribution partners. Now, you might have one importer, you might have 20 regional distribution partners. This is just let's say a basic framework to think about. It's a starting point. It's just quick and dirty, yeah, because if I was going to do a deep dive, then I have like a whole list of really specific questions that I like to do for an annual assessment, because that is something that if I'm working long term with clients, I like to encourage them to do an annual assessment of their distribution partners, which, yes, it takes time, but you yourself, it's a two-way street, and you yourself have to be sure you're asking for the right metrics and giving the right KPIs for your partners for China for the present time in the market. So if we start out on that, I'm going to come with 6 dimensions, and I'd like you to think about, on a scale of 1 to 5, how would you score your main partners? Let's start with the most important ones, or maybe you only have one, in the Chinese market. We're looking at this through the lens of future-proofing your business. So, like I said before, don't confuse a partner who's demanding with a bad partner, because, of course, the market demands a lot of changes from you. And if you're not able to deliver those requirements, then that is you who's not delivering, let's say, on your brand promise, rather than your distribution partner who's failing in some way. So you can see here the 6 dimensions that I've prepared for you to think about. And because we talked about China's speed at the beginning, let's go first of all into market responsiveness. Yes, please, let's go into market responsiveness. Okay, we're not going to do that. So think about your partners. Are they leveraging all of the latest platforms in the right ways effectively for your business? That might be Douyin, it might be Xiaohongshu, it could be WeChat channels. Then again, it might also be Jihu or in some way, or it could be that question, are they staying ahead of the market shifts that are characterizing the Chinese market? For example, for me, because I'm working a lot in food and beverages, then we're talking right now a lot about health trends, but also price sensitivity has increased. I think that's a general thing across the board. Sustainability has become much more of a question than it was 5 years ago. Of course, people still love to have that beautiful packaging, but they also want to have a more sustainable approach. Is your distribution partner actively updating their strategies based on consumer insights? And most importantly, are they pushing you as their principal to update your approach to the Chinese market? You know, if you have a partner who's still using those same old official WeChat strategy from 5 years ago, then that is not going to cut it anymore in today's Chinese market. So moving on to the second point I'd like you to think about, consumer insight and data sharing. Do your clients regularly provide you with really meaningful data about the market? And I'm not talking just raw sales numbers. I'm talking about why things are happening. I'm talking about how things are changing. Are they collecting and sharing those insights on local consumer behavior? Because if you're selling in Shanghai, then your consumers have different interests than your consumers in Anhui, Yunnan, or in Wuhan, Chengdu. It doesn't matter. China is so big that you have to have regional strategies. So if they're not giving you that kind of proactive feedback on how your global messaging needs to be localized for the various regional markets, then that has to be a red flag for you. If you have the feeling, and you can actually back up that data, that you know more about your customers in China than they do, then that is a serious red flag. Okay. Number 3, brand building and commitment. This is one of those topics which I feel like it hasn't evolved as much as the others do or have done over the years. And in lots of cases, especially in the consumer goods space, what I hear brands complain about is the fact that the distribution partner in China is often not really committed to growing the brand, but they're more just another product on the list. They're more interested in shifting boxes rather than building the brand equity. So what you need to be looking for is this question: is your partner pushing for the kind of premium or niche positioning, if that's relevant, instead of defaulting to price cuts when things get difficult? Are they really focusing on how to build your brand awareness? And are they actively engaging in a co-branding approach? Or maybe that's PR or influencer partnerships. And we know, all of us, I'm sure, that share of mind and share of wallet, of course, is always a key part of any kind of channel sales business. It's always one of the factors in building the loyalty. But if both sides can't earn money, and if both sides are not committed to building the brand, then this may not be the right partner for you for the long term. Okay, the fourth dimension that I would like to look at is this question of competitive intelligence and market feedback. How much information are you getting about the market and about what competitors are really doing in the market in China? Does your partner come to you and flag a regulatory shift or an emerging trend really in good time for you as a brand to be able to react to that? Now, especially for me, for example, in the food and beverage business, that might mean changes that mean you have to completely redevelop your recipes, that you have to do shelf stability studies and so on. And so you really need that information at least a year in advance, as soon as that new regulation is announced. Otherwise, you can't adapt to it. Or like I had in the past with, for example, my Chinese importer flagging to me that one of the main competitors was completely changing their strategy around distribution and sub-distribution margins and moving margins over to that part of the business rather than investing in, let's say, large style digital campaigns and branding strategies. And this was because of a short-term situation in the market, but they needed us to be agile enough and to change our approach and allow them to change their approach with margins in order to keep up with the trends on the market and to satisfy the deeper demands of the distribution chain. If we talk about our fifth dimension, it's not quite at the end, agility and innovation. I think in lots of cases, because we know about China speed, we tend to assume that this is built into the DNA of our Chinese distribution partners, but that isn't necessarily the case. Like with all of us, humans sometimes find change uncomfortable. So are your distribution partners flexible enough to adapt to the new consumer preferences? Are they actively suggesting to you new products, new packaging tweaks, or localized campaigns? Or are they experimenting with the new sales channels that are available? Like maybe that might be, in your case, private domain traffic. It might be doing more live streaming. It might be more focus on social commerce. Are they pushing you as a principal to innovate faster? Because if your Chinese partner isn't pushing you to innovate faster as a European company, then probably, yeah, I would be quite surprised if there are any Chinese companies out there who are totally satisfied with the speed of innovation of their European partners. If you can name me one, then I'm going to go and talk to them to find out what it is that they're doing, because I would be truly interested in doing some research there. Okay, and finally, the last dimension that I want to look at with you is the one that kind of underpins all of the rest, of course. The financial and operational reliability. On a scale of 1 to 5, are your partners in China consistently meeting their payment and their stock level commitments? Because it's not just about the money here. It's also about, do they keep enough stock to always have your products available? Do they have the financial strength to support the growth that both of you would like to have, or are they over leveraged? Yeah? Are they investing in things like logistics, warehousing, and supply chain improvements? And are they investing in their team? I mean, let's face it, if you don't have a team of the right quality and the right size at your distribution partner, then you may be lost, especially in a consumer goods business, where you have this distribution partner as your extended arm in the market, but they don't actually report to you. How about things like CRM systems and product traceability that are big topics in Europe, especially if you're talking about food and beverage? You have things like, can all of your distribution partners do a recall within, I think, 48 hours? And can they document that? That is something that is not necessarily required by law in China, but you might have that as a requirement. Don't be afraid to make demands on your Chinese partners, but it may be a case of you needing to educate them, and that being a process that isn't done at China speed, I would say. So having gone through all of those, think about how many of those dimensions do your partners score below a 3? as an average. If they're weak on just one point, or they are strong in, but they are strong in the others, how can you support your Chinese distribution teams and your distribution partners further down in the chain in order to improve on those dimensions? This is really a process. It's an ongoing process. It involves a lot of time and energy on your behalf to talk with them and to convince them of the importance of doing that. If you find that your distribution partner is weak across the board, then it might be time to consider a change of partner. But we all know changing your distribution partner costs you in terms of sales, often up to around, for a period of around 6 months, that you're in confusion and turmoil on the market. And it also, of course, is your nerves and time. So you have to be prepared as a brand to actually invest in that. And you have to be very sure before you take the jump that you are actually moving to a better partner, because you don't want to move out of the frying pan into the fire, as the saying goes. You need to know that you're not just running away from one partner, you're moving to a partner who is more positive in all of the dimensions that are important to you as a brand. And what I would suggest to you is that you think about developing a scorecard that you can use for all of your markets, not just China, but China is probably one of your most important markets, so it's a good place to start, where you really do an annual deep dive together with your distribution partners and discuss with them what can be improved. And that also gives them the opportunity to give you feedback as a principal, because you probably do some kind of annual assessment or annual appraisal with your own members of staff, but doing them with distribution partners isn't something that is necessarily automatic in most companies. And I do feel that time that you invest here is something that will reward you in the long term. And that often when European companies are thinking about doing things at China speed, they think about pushing decisions before they've actually made, especially when we're talking new business, they think about pushing decisions before they've actually invested enough in the relationship to be able to ask for those decisions. And that results in them then thinking that the Chinese partner is being difficult, or they're being a nuisance, or they're putting pressure on and making unreasonable demands, simply because the relationship isn't strong enough to really withstand the discussions, the honest discussions, the difficult discussions that you need to have in both directions. Yeah. So if anybody's got any questions, I hope I didn't talk for too long there, then you are very welcome to reach out to me. Please do send me a connection request on LinkedIn, or if you prefer to talk on WeChat, I've included my QR code there that you can scan for my WeChat. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Catherine. Very interesting, and definitely a very hands-on and actionable thing to take away, to have these 6 points and to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5. So I think we really appreciate that. I would like to open up the floor to anybody who has a question. So if you have a question, you can raise your digital hands, and I should see you on screen, and I can say your name. That we want to give a moment to that now, either to Catherine or to myself. And then when we wrap it up, just a reminder, we are going to send you the presentation slides either today or tomorrow to the email address that you used to register with. So everybody is shy. That is okay. Catherine, if you would summarize your presentation with one key takeaway, what would it be?
I would recommend that you really take a close look at your partners and think about, because in difficult times, you have to dive into the details and look at your distribution partners in China. Think about who is loyal to you and who is really committed to building the business as a partner to you and not just as somebody who trades in your business.
Okay, very nice. Thank you so much. And I see one raised hand. Christoph, please go ahead. You're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. I like this a lot, this presentation model, and I'd like to ask you an iconoclast question. You rightly pointed out that one of the dimensions that we tend to forget or not have present when we discuss with our Chinese partners is the annual plan, the 5 annual plans that I mentioned, into which they are all locked in. I see them, when I have discussions with them, I see the perspective I have is seeing the guys coming here to Europe, and they have this dimension in mind, and they are always trying to find the points of attachment to actually relate their long-term targets to our long-term targets. And so one remark here is that in your presentation, you said it in several instances, but it's really a long-term thing to do business in China and with China. And the second thing is, I think that what you are presenting here is really valuable for Chinese companies coming into Europe, and for European companies welcoming Chinese partners.
Thank you.
It's and I would like to see that more in this perspective being carried out. I think it's a real opportunity for you guys.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Very good. Yeah, that was very nice feedback. I appreciate it. And indeed, I just asked Catherine what her main summary or key takeaway from her point of view is. And if I would just add my point of view is that if I would summarize it, is that I would encourage the China GMs or China MD. It doesn't matter what your nationality is, but if you are responsible for China, for an international company, to strongly encourage you to start, we call it managing up, to learn how to manage up your headquarter and to not just be in the see yourself in the subordinate position to the headquarter. Headquarter says A, B, C, whatever that may be, and we in China just do. No, you are, I feel it's your duty almost. If I look at how the world is moving at the moment, I would say it's your duty for you to keep China, your China entity that you're responsible for successful, to learn to manage up and to learn how to influence the headquarter. And so if you have the same nationality as your headquarters, that will be easier because you can speak in a way that they will be open to listening. If you have a different nationality than your headquarters, that will be more different. So that is something I would encourage you to do, because the issues that we mentioned are not going away. And if you want to continue being successful in your international legal entity in China, I think that is one key takeaway. One key takeaway I would encourage you to focus on. And there are lots of trainings. You can Google managing up. You can Google influencing skills. You can understand what the headquarter wants. So there are many different ways. You can Google, if you're Chinese, your headquarters in Germany. You can understand low context communication cultures. How do they want to be spoken to for them to receive it? This is all Googleable. So this information is something that you can find out, but I would really recommend that you make this a priority. Good. Any other questions? We're going to give it another 1 minute. And if nobody has any questions, any comments, then we would like to thank you so much for joining again today for our webinar in April. Thanking especially Catherine for joining us with a very timely and very interesting and hands-on presentation, which I really enjoyed. And at the same time, we are already sending out invitations soon for the webinar in May, which will take place, I want to say the 18th of May, but the presentation, the invitation will go out to you if that's interesting as well. Very good. I see no additional hands. Thank you, everybody, so much. This was really great. I hope you have a really good rest of the afternoon. If you are talking to headquarters, please be reminded that tomorrow Easter holiday starts. So most European will be on holiday tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We not. But so if your clients or colleagues are not replying, that's due to Easter holiday. If you're celebrating, happy Easter. And otherwise, I'm looking forward to see you at the next event. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.